name's Daniel and welcome to this. I have in front of me the 42052 LEGO heavy lift helicopter. One of a few newer acquisitions that I've made on the used LEGO parts market. It's a bit of a new thing that I've been exploring to try and get just to buy LEGO models used instead of new. Partially because simply I don't actually like some of the newer models that LEGO has brought out, or in this specific case, a specific aircraft model I was looking forward to was cancelled. It's quite a big model, 60 centimeters by about 50, although most of that is the propellers. It's fully motorized, so I don't have much really to do, theoretically at least. Normally I motorize functions on these models that are not yet motorized. In this case, everything is motorized, and in fact that actually might have been a slight problem with this model. The usual functions that this thing has is the propellers turn, and they turn counter to each other, so one turns clockwise, the other one turns counterclockwise. It has a motor in the front, which you can switch the battery box of, and then it has a gearbox with two selectors, one on each side, to control the propellers, to control the ramp, either or, and then while the propellers are running you can also control the bay doors at the bottom, and then a winch will extend out of it. I must say I really like the features. I really do like the features of this model. It's a very interesting build, kind of a simple build. Basically this entire piece at the top is the gearbox. On top of that comes a propeller assembly, and everything else is just built up around it. Meaning that there's a lot of air inside this machine. Most of the technology is in the top. Specifically behind here is the cargo area, so that obviously has to be empty. This was also empty, it now no longer is. I like the wheels, the little jumpy wheels here. I always have some ideas, I always have some things that I dislike. One thing, the main thing that I personally disliked about this model is that you would have to change the polarity of the engine down here, and you'd have to you'd use the battery box, which is very difficult to actually hit the middle point if you want to switch the engine off. You'd overshoot things, and also the propellers would turn first in one direction, and then you'd reverse the polarity of the engine, and they'd turn in the other direction. Sounds logical. The problem is, if you're running the propellers while you're running the flaps at the bottom, the bay doors and the winch, you're playing with the aircraft, it's flying around, and you want to reverse the winch, and you reverse the engine, and then your rotors stop, come to a full stop, and reverse. And that I don't like. That's, in a real helicopter, that would cause a crash. And also I felt like the tail wasn't, there was a feature missing at the tail. Those two things I think I've managed quite well. So first let's show the propellers. You've got here the engine running. You can put here, I'll have a look, I still don't know it off by heart, there we go. That should be the propellers. And then I have at the front here a little bar, which is the gear selector. Forwards, backwards. You can see the propellers don't change the direction, they always turn in the same direction. You can hear the engine struggling a bit. There's quite a few new gears in here, and also I've made a mistake. I've put in an extra slip gear, which I'm going to have to take out because it's unnecessary, and double slip gears, it makes it, there's always a weakest link. So there are parts slipping in here, but the cogs aren't slipping themselves. It's solved in a rather novel way. It's basically tacked on at the end of the drive chain instead of the beginning of the drive chain, which is a bit backwards, but as always with these mods, I didn't want to completely re-engineer the gearbox. So the gearbox in the middle here is basically the same. I've tacked on something extra on the front, and I've tacked on something extra inside here, but I haven't really had to take apart the gearbox too much. There's a bit more modification. You do have to take the model apart quite far, at least into its single component parts, as into the gearbox, into the propeller assembly, and the tail comes off and everything. But I've made it run that the propellers only ever run in this direction, and it's the direction that the propellers are, from their shape, supposed to run. Second thing is a rather simple thing. Little gimbal at the bottom, you can up, down, left, right. It's just a little gimbal thing here. I'm calling it a gimbal, I don't actually know. Little lever, left, right, up, down. That's just... It's simple. It's not even... It's like 10 parts. This should have been in the model. This should have been how this works. It's so much better. It makes so much more sense. This is a bit of finicky, not up to LEGO standards, I don't think. Probably, it doesn't slip, it doesn't break, but there are some rather small gears doing the transferring. I couldn't get it any better without rebuilding the entire gearbox. But I'm no longer the only person who has ideas about LEGO nowadays. I have a son, he's 7 years old, and he had his own little annoyances. Specifically, he found this entire engine on and then gearbox very stressful. He'd struggled to get it to work. And what he wanted to do is just open the bay door at the back, open the loading door at the back here, not the bay, not these doors, but the loading door. He just wanted to open that. And to open that, normally you'd have to switch it on, and you have to select, and in my case you then have to use the gear selector, which is fine, but it's a bit more complicated. What he wanted to do was simply choose the door, turn the knob, and it opens. Same thing theoretically for the propellers. Now this is not really the speed that you want to be running a propeller, but you can also do the same thing for the doors at the bottom. Slowly but surely open. It's slow, you know, it's not fast, but they don't have to open very far. And theoretically you could run the winch, but the winch you really want to run with the car, with the engine. Specifically for the door at the back, and maybe for these doors at the bottom, and also just to get it back if you've screwed with it and it's all open to reset it. Very nice to have. So I think I'm going to bring you guys a bit closer and we'll have a look inside some of the details of this machine. The good thing about this change is it's rather easy to access everything. The aircraft itself has this lid which you can simply remove, and then we can rather easily see inside what I've done. If we move the propellers apart a bit, you can see there's a little bit of extra gearing here. The gears used to go into the actual propeller assembly quite far down, about in there somewhere. I've had to move them up a bit to make space for this extra bit here, and you can already see what's probably going to happen. I've got the engine running, and you can see in a minute how the actual changing of direction works. You can see that little seesaw thing in the middle that skips and turns to the other side. That's basically all there is to it. The red gear's down there, that's the normal drivetrain, and all I've done is put the grey gear, that grey gear there, on top of the normal drivetrain, and it goes into this little seesaw. And that seesaw engages these two red gears. Depending on which direction it turns, it engages a different gear, adding a single gear to the entire train. So if it goes through here, it goes through 1, 2, 3, 4 gears. If it goes through here, it goes through 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 gears. And that changes the polarity, changes the turning direction of the propeller, but it's not actually the turning direction of the propeller that's changing, it's the turning direction of the input that's changing. You can see here if I do it with my finger a bit. Yeah. If I turn this way, it engages that one. If I turn that way, it engages the other one. It's just simply friction. But it's actually quite logical that it happens that way, because the seesaw itself has less friction than the cogs, because the cogs, there are 2 cogs on the seesaw, so they have double the amount of friction as the seesaw itself, which is in perfect balance as it has the same cog on both sides. You have to have the same cog on both sides, it has to be a single bar, if not it will not work. We're going to have a look at this bit of this block in this inside here. Now it's difficult to see what is happening in here. I'm going to try and show you, but the main thing is, let's get the light in there, is this gear selector down there. We have on the side here a bar which has 2 teeth which grabs the gear selector and can then select in whatever direction we're trying to go. And what happens then is it goes up into these two cogs, and they are constantly turning. They are always connected. And then it goes over 3 cogs. 1, there's another one under there, 2, 3. Depending if we power the left or the right side, it will change the direction that the output is going in. So I can probably show you that. It's probably a bit too fast to actually show you properly. There we go, that's one side. That's the other side. That actually changes the direction. You can hardly see it because it turns so fast, but that is basically what is happening in there. And then passes right through into this cog and goes to the back. That's all that block is. Most of this is stabilization, because this entire thing is mounted basically without taking too much of it apart. I did take the cockpit off the front, so you can simply just lift the nose. There you go, you can lift the nose like that. You can take the seats out, and you can disconnect the entire cockpit. You do that, and then you have this block, which is these 2 brackets, connected with some bars and some, I've bent something there, connected with some bars and with some, just connectors basically. It's on the bottom. It's also quite a bit more stable, and it connects into there are some cross beams here and there's some cross beams here, and that's what it connects into the helicopter. For completeness, just to show you, very, very simple mechanism, very, very wobbly. Very simple mechanism. Minor redesigns also had to be made here. I'll show you guys the bottom. The battery box is now held by this little assembly. Sometimes the rods stay in there. That used to be different, but I had to shorten the rods that go in. And then if you take out the battery box and hold it into the light, you can actually see quite well how the motor is between those 2 frames. It has there's the output. Here's our gearing system, and these are all just stabilizations to get it connected. There's a pin in there that goes through into a connection, and that's just to connect it in. Getting this block to be stable enough so that specifically these gears here do not jump is actually quite difficult. That is something which I did fight with, and if you put too much pressure on it, it will still have some problems. But yeah, that's the main part of the mod. There are still some minor things that I could have improved. If I'd been willing to take apart the front part of the helicopter a bit further, I probably could have made the gearbox even more stable, or slightly less massive, and just bind it into the actual structure of the helicopter a bit better. As it is, it needs a lot of connecting parts, and I've actually noticed that there are some of the parts that can still loosen, specifically the gearing, the 3-gear thing that changes the direction. So you have the gear on one side, gear on the other side, and gear connecting them 2 on the top where the output goes into. That top gear does tend to slip a bit, i.e. the connecting it goes through does get pushed down a bit, and I've noticed here that 2 of the pins are actually loose and have pushed into the actual model, so I probably have to brace them from the other side. So that's something which I will probably change. I'll brace it a bit better. And also what I have at the moment, which I think I mentioned beforehand, I have 2 slip gears in here. I have the original slip gear up here. You can hardly see it, but I have the original slip gear up here, and I have a secondary slip gear down there on the actual motor itself. While I was testing it, the gearbox did actually bind up a few times because I hadn't got everything nice and stable, and so I decided to put a slip gear in, which I actually think, in hindsight, I either would take out the original slip gear or the one directly on the engine. I'm not sure which one would be best. Simply because 2 slip gears, I think you might have seen it in some of the demonstrations, the entire thing does slip more than necessary. Also, through some part of the cogs up here to do the propellers, the propeller mod, I have actually unfortunately made the propeller slightly slower. It has this one big gear at the top, and if that gear was smaller, then it would run faster, but it doesn't. I haven't seen any other way of doing this without re-engineering the entire gearbox. So I'm fine with this. I'm fine with the propellers turning a bit slower. It also means that the pressure on the actual gears isn't as high because the torque is about the same, but faster would mean more energy would have to pass through it. Interesting for me, for the set, as a Lego builder who, as I've mentioned in previous videos, is kind of behind on the times on some of the models that have come out. This is technically, let's say, the fourth model of a sort of a new Technic that I've built. Quite standard from what I'm now used to from this sort of 2016, 17 sort of era. I think this one was also in that sort of era when it came out. And yeah, so a lot of pieces that I'm now quite used to seeing, but for me they were quite new. What I found kind of interesting, obviously here the propeller blades, specific obviously for helicopter models. I think there was an older helicopter model that had at least similar ones. I quite like them. There's 6 of them in the model, so I mean you can only use them for helicopters, but you could build 2 helicopters from this one. In fact, the B model is a bigger double rotor helicopter instead of a single rotor with 2 rotors counteracting. It has one here, one here. What I also found interesting, specifically it is 2020, so with the 2020 Technic models we have the big cement mixer, and the first time I saw that I was like, oh my god, massive cement mixer parts. That's a bit strange for Technic, but then I noticed that the actual turbines on this one are also cement mixer parts, so there is precedent. These are obviously smaller ones, as I'm guessing for some city models or something, but they are functional. I haven't tested them, but in theory they fit together. There's a bit of a weird connecting issue. I'm not sure if maybe there should be a left and a right side, and these are just 2 right sides because it's the Technic model. But it would still work. Some pieces might get stuck on some of the knobs, and I'm not sure how big the pieces are that you could put in here. But okay, this is not something new. This is something that Technic has had done before. It's just now they've done it bigger. I like this kind of thing, specifically in this kind of model where you buy a helicopter but you also get 2 pieces to build a cement mixer, for instance. Small little city cement mixer. Very, very nice, lovely. A lot of panels, quite a few lift arms, but mainly panels and mainly gears. A lot of gears in this one. 2 of these lovely gears here. I like the decorational pieces here. I like the decoration of the cockpit. Very, very nice. Very happy with that. You can see the stickers are on it, except for the ones on the back here. There should be some stickers here. I bought this used. I bought it as is. It was mounted. It was built. Brought it home, took it apart, and then rebuilt it from scratch. And then added my modifications after having built it once completely on my own. I had to redo most of the stickers. I've mentioned before I dislike stickers because they do peel, and if you don't do them perfectly they look kind of bad, and the person beforehand had not done them well. So a bit of shame that way. I mean, not everyone cares as much, but there were some horrendous mistakes done. So many of the stickers I did actually pull off carefully and put them back on, reapply, which is, on the other hand, I mean, it's possible. It works. You can actually do it. The Lego stickers are hardy enough that you can actually pull them off. You can see that you've done it in a way, but if the option is pull them off and leave them off, or pull them off and reapply them, I'm fine with reapplying them. In this case it was actually really necessary because the stickers were somehow, some of them were actually stuck over Technic holes. Like for instance here with this one, the sticker was off so far that it was actually covering one of the holes at the top. I'm not having that. No, not on my models. I'm, in that case, if I do put stickers on, as I've said, I put them on very, very precisely. I actually made sure that here these lines, they actually line up perfectly. I put them in as good as I can. So yeah, that's a minor little thing. Yeah, so I'm going to probably take this apart and probably actually start building the B model. I don't believe I'll be upgrading the B model unless there's something on it that annoys me greatly, but normally the B models are fine from what they can do. If I find any new Technic models, either new or maybe more used ones in the future, maybe I'll manage to find some upgrades for the car transporter. At the moment I just built it and liked it how it was, but maybe if I find some upgrades there I might post something on that. If you're interested in that, or if you found anything that I told you today helpful, leave a comment, leave a like, and yeah, tell me if this was in any way useful. Other than that, wish you good health in these weird times nowadays, as I said, beginning of 2020, and well, goodbye. Well then, I noticed that the actual, whoa,